Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. I'm Nika and I make book related videos, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I read in the month of February. So we have all the details right here. This is my reading journal. I have also updated the journal. After a month ends, I do the next month reset, during which I update the journal for the month that has ended, as well as set up the new spreads for the upcoming new month. So I'll make sure to link that somewhere up here and you can check that out, my March reset video. But let's start with my February reads. I read a total of 17 books, and it was a total of 5,787 pages. Of these, I read 10 physical books, 6 ebooks, and 1 audiobook. So 17. And among the genres, you could say I read 5 literary fiction, 5 fantasy, 1 poetry, and 6 romances. So that is all the details from my statistics page, and now I'm going to start with the individual reviews of the books. I know since I read 17 books, I cannot delve too deep into each book, otherwise this video is going to be hours long. So I'm gonna briefly go over what the book was about and what I felt while reading it. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. So the first book that I read in February was The Color Purple. Now this one right here doesn't have anything because this is a second-hand book that I bought at a second-hand bookshop. The Color Purple is by Alice Walker and it's a very famous book. Now the reason I picked it up was because it was Black History Month, and so I personally haven't read a lot of African American or African books in general, so I thought that I would make use of this reading challenge, reading month, to broaden my reading horizon basically. So I read this book. This is basically a story of Celie and Nettie. These are the two sisters, black sisters, who have kind of lived a very difficult life. Celie has been raped by her father, and then she has 2 children with him, and they are taken away. She is married off to an older man who does not love her. It's a very difficult situation that she finds herself in. Now, Celia and Nettie are very bonded. They are very close sisters. However, because of circumstances, they are both away from each other. So whole story takes place in the form of letters that Celie first writes to God, and then she starts writing to Nettie, her sister. So it's a beautiful story. It is, of course, very heartbreaking, not an easy read at all, and it deals with so much racism, sexism, all of that. So the position of women, firstly as a black woman, and then as a woman, her position is in multiple jeopardy. Everything. She doesn't have a lot of power in a patriarchal society. But then, this other character called Shug Avery comes along, and then it is from Shug Avery that Celie understands what it is to be independent, modern, and everything. Of course, everything has its pros and cons, as Celie sees. But overall, it was a very heartbreaking book, and it's also a very beautiful book. I am happy that I finally read it. I first picked it up in class 7 or 8, but I was too young to understand the language. It's written in African American vernacular English, so I think it's not an easy read in terms of language, also for a lot of people who are not, who haven't read this sort of book, or watched this sort of movies or series media before. So also the content is kinda adult, so go in knowing all of that, the trigger warnings as well. But overall, this was a really good book, and I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on, I read this amazing book called Black Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James. This is book 1 in our trilogy, and I have had this book for many years, but it took me this month to actually pick it up. So I definitely do believe, now I do believe, that the book chooses the reader at the particular time. But anyway, so this is an African inspired adult fantasy. This has a lot of trigger warnings, so do go in knowing that. It's also not a book for kids or even middle grade. It's definitely an adult. So basically in this book we follow the character whose name we are never told. We only know him as Tracker because he tracks people for a living. So him and a few other ragtag people, I shouldn't say ragtag, it's a very alt group for sure, but everybody has different powers. One is a shapeshifter who shapeshifts into a leopard. That's where the name, black leopard comes from. Then we have a witch, we have got this giant man, we've got a man who is sort of like a policeman who works for the government, like a police. So it's a mixed group of people, and they are all trying to find this one little boy who disappeared, I think, 3 years ago. Overall, this is a great book. It is the story. How do I say this? Okay, so the way the story is narrated is within a story within a story. It has that particular framing device. So basically, Tracker is actually narrating all the stories that has happened in this book to the Inquisitor, and even when he's saying the story is never linear, he goes in to a different time, and then he mentions a particular adventure he had with someone at that time. Then he comes back to the actual linear flow. Then he goes back to another story, how he knows this person, that person. So it's all very, very related. It took me some time to get into it, but once I did, I just loved this book. I'm definitely going to get book 2 sometime soon. I am not ready to pick up a heavy book immediately, but I'm definitely going to read that book as well. This has amazing book. There are redemption arcs, there are shape-shifting elements, like I said, the leopard. There are some mysteries which are retained until the very end. There is action that drives you to the edge of the seat, and you're thinking what's going to happen next. You're just going on and on. It's a beautiful book. I mean, no wonder I read it so quickly, because let's see, it is 620 pages long, and I made these notes at the very end. So overall, it was a really good book. This was another 4-star read for me, not this month, but in February, and I'm definitely going to read book 2 very, very soon. Next book that I read was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. Now, I have wanted to read this book for the longest time because it is exactly up my alley. It's got weird stories, not stories, but it's a weird story. Weird things are happening, kind of like Annihilation vibes, if you've seen that movie, which is based on Jeff Vandermeer's book. So anyway, in Wilder Girls, we follow these girls who are in a school, in a boarding school, and their school is the only place inhabited by people within that island. It's a small island, but it's just them, their school. So what happens is suddenly they get to know that there is this strange disease that is spreading around in the world, and that is why they should quarantine. It's like COVID, but this is much worse, because the girls start having these symptoms and kind of mutate. So as you can see, this girl is kind of disappeared. There's one girl whose right eye I think that's the heroine, her right eye doesn't really work. There's another girl who started developing not fins, but like scales. You get my gist, right? So everybody's developed these sorts of mutations and everything. So it's basically them against the world, them against the wildness, trying to survive. And it has affected the animals also. So animals have become very, very dangerous. This definitely gave me Annihilation vibes. I would definitely recommend you to check out that movie, because I think you're going to enjoy it if you've liked listening to the synopsis of this book. Overall, it was a nice enough book, but it really kind of fell short of my expectation, because firstly, the ending was really kept open-ended. I would have preferred there to be some closure for me as a reader as to what happened, what was happening, what things were hidden from the people, what actually was happening in the world versus in the on the island, everything. The characters were kind of unlikable, even though I rooted for the heroine, of course. Everyone was kind of unlikable. Some were unnecessarily aggressive, some were hiding too many secrets, some were very sus. So yeah, overall it was an okay read, but I wouldn't really say that it matched my expectations. I rated it 3 stars, could have been much, much better. Moving on, I then read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Again, this is a book that I read for the Black History Month. In this book, we follow this girl called Cora, who is working on a plantation in the South. This is before slaves had been freed, basically. So the Underground Railroad, as you know, is a way through which blacks basically escaped their lives as slaves in the South and went northwards within North America, and then sometimes also went to Canada. But however, that is more or less an abstract concept. But in this book, Colson Whitehead has really given a very interesting twist to this, because there is an actual railroad, underground railroad, that connects these people and gives them a chance to escape from the plantations and go north, where black people are essentially free. So that was a very nice sci-fi kind of element that Colson Whitehead has added to this. Overall, we follow Cora, who is a slave in a plantation, and her trials and tribulations as she tries to escape. And then, what actually made me very anxious was there is a slave catcher whose name is, I think, Ridgway. He once was hired by the plantation owners of Cora's plantation to catch Cora's mother who had escaped. And Ridgway had never been able to catch Cora's mother, so that has always been an ick for him. He's caught every other slave, but he could never catch Cora's mother. And so when he finds out that Cora has also escaped, it is personal for him. So we follow his um, attempts at trying to catch her again and again, and Cora's trials within the plantation and outside as well, because not everybody is open to accepting black people in their midst, even when, basically people are still lobbying for abolition and everything like that. So it was an interesting read, kind of heartbreaking at points, of course, but I would definitely recommend it to you. I rated this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, moving on, I also read Homegoing by Yar Gyasi. Now, this is a multi-generational saga, again following two sisters who actually do not know of each other's existence, and two lead very different lives. One becomes the wife of a slave trader, and then the other is sold into slavery. So we follow these two branches grow and how each generation faces their own difficulties. It places a lot of kind of like binaries, you could say. You see people in an African village in their living their own lives, minding their own business, and then these white people come and try to capture them and everything. You see people from one tribe going into war against another, and then capturing the people from the tribe that has lost, and then selling them into slavery. So it's got a lot of morally gray shades as well. Then within from on the other branch, we see these people in America when the blues jazz is coming up. We see the Harlem Renaissance scene and everything. So it's very, very interesting. It deals with a lot of those same issues as, let's say, the other books that, Underground Railroad and everything, slavery, racism, all of that. But this, I think, was different in the sense that it had a thread of hope throughout. This is very much like The Color Purple in that sense, because both of these, even though of course it shows us or tells us of the different harrowing experiences that black people had to live through, there was also this tone of hope that, okay, at the end of the tunnel there's going to be light. But I could not really find that in the Underground Railroad. That was kind of a darker read for me. But in comparison, Yar Gyasi's Homegoing was definitely had a tone of hope throughout, which was kind of satisfying and fulfilling at the same end, if you know what I mean. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this book. This is a multi-generational saga, so we follow these two branches. And the interesting thing is that each sister had a locket. So they pass it down the generation. So as the story moves on, you are eager to see how these last, or whoever will be the last people on which the story will be ended, how they will meet and everything. So it's a very interesting way the story was kept going on, and I was hooked until the very last page. So I would definitely recommend this book. I rated it 4 stars. I did mix up my reading. Of course, it was not just Black History Month books throughout. I wanted something thrilling and kind of fast paced. So that's why I picked up What Big Teeth by Rose Sabo. Now, this is basically following Eleanor Zarin, who was in a boarding school, but something happens. We are not told what until the end, of course. Something happens because of which she flees the boarding school and comes back to her family, the same from which she had been estranged for the longest time. And in her family, everybody is weird, everybody is mysterious, and everybody kind of has the power to harm her. So imagine a scenario where you're not safe in your own environment, in your own home. So that was done really well. It was fast paced, and I think I binge read it. Again, of course, I had a few issues with it. Let's see. So there's this love triangle which I found to be very weird, and then there's other character called Arthur who felt very passive to me, but at the end he kind of plays a major role. So it's a very sudden shift that I thought could have been done a lot more smoothly. Also the end, I think it was really rushed. The author could have added a lot more element to it, and pace it down, but the end was very abrupt, very sudden, so I did not really, it felt anticlimactic to me after all the build up the beginning had, because the vibes were simply giving really lovely gothic vibes, the haunted kind of mansion, course, people who read fortunes in the guts of birds, werewolves, I mean, you can of course imagine from the picture itself, and also that's not a spoiler, it's in the very first prologue itself. So anyway, everybody is kind of weird in a nice way, not nice way, but scary way, and interesting for me as a reader way, but the ending kind of messed it up for me. So yeah, I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read a very anticipated book series, or rather a duology, and that is the Letters of Enchantment series. And in this, the first book is Divine Rivals, and book 2 is Ruthless Vows. Now, I firstly want to thank HarperCollins for sending me the book, because I was very excited to read it. I've seen it around on Bookstagram, and I was like, I need to read it, because let me tell you what the book is about. It's about these two people who are working, these two journalists who are working at a paper, and they have to write, of course, articles and everything. They have to go out, research, but it's kind of also a workplace romance kind of, because they're sort of like enemies. They keep on she keeps on messing up the things on his desk and everything. So the premise was really nice. The background of it is that there is a war looming between gods, so kind of adding the fantasy to a very contemporary environment. That was very well done, and I really liked it, and surprisingly it worked really well. Then the favorite part that really intrigued me was that these two people are also connected magically. So what happens is that the character Winnow, she has a magical typewriter, it seems. When she writes a letter and then she keeps it, another reply comes to her, so that it means that someone else has another typewriter that lets them write a letter that is magically sent to Winnow. So that's the basic premise. It was very well done, and I ended up rating both of these 4 out of 5 stars, both of them, and I really had a good time reading it. There's also a lot of letter writing. The letters go back and forth. An epistolary format, that is story told through the means of letters, is one of my favorite means of storytelling. So I had a doubly fun time reading these books, this series, this duology. Really amazing, and I think the covers are also very stunning. So yeah, would definitely recommend it. There's angst, there's romance, there's a lot of action as well, because the people go, I don't want to give spoilers, but people end up going to the war front and everything, and things at the front of the war is of course very different from how they would back home. So everything is done really well. Definitely do recommend, and I'm sure you'll have a good time with it. Also, if you are someone who has commitment issues and is unwilling to pick up huge series, then this is just a duology, so you can pick them up, and it ends here only. So yeah, another 4-star read for me this month, February. We are almost at the end. I want to talk about The Mothers by Brit Bennett next. Now, I read The Vanishing Half a couple of years ago and I really loved it. So I don't know why I delayed picking this up, because I ended up loving this book too. The way it is written is beautiful. It is so stunning, so lyrical. Would definitely recommend. As for the story, it basically follows Nadia Turner. We follow Nadia Turner, who is very grief-stricken because she has just lost her mother. So within that space, she needs love, she needs some care, and who does she turn to but a guy in her community? And I forgot his name, Luke. So she and Luke. Now it's not serious; they're young, but they end up, pregnant basically. But however, this is a huge secret because they are still in high school, the very end of high school. So it's not a secret that can go out. So they shush it up, and years later, it all kind of comes back to bite them in the ass, sort of. Now Nadia hides this fact, this incident, from everyone, including her best friend Audrey or Aubrey. But then the story fast forwards. Nadia goes on to become, I think, a lawyer. She's studying for law and everything. And then even then we see how the actions, the steps that they took back when they were teenagers is coming back to them, and they are all caught up in this love triangle that they can make no sense of. No particular action can ensure that it will not harm the other. Something or the other kind of keeps happening. So it's a book that actually lets you explore the what ifs. So I think it was really well done, and there were some elements which I did not like, because there are some issues or things that I do not really condone, even when the people, not even when the people commit those things. But I don't want to give away any spoilers. But overall, it was a good book, really interesting book actually. It's set in contemporary South California, I think. So it's not, let's say, set in the time when slavery was still there. And I think it's a modern, contemporary book. So if you're looking for something like that, then this is something you can also pick up. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this book. Rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on, I finally also read Giovanni's Room, which is a cult classic at this point by James Baldwin. So in this book, we basically follow David. I think he's a white boy in Paris, and his relationship with Giovanni, who is an Italian bartender in Paris. They meet, and the story goes from there. So what we see is that these two kind of start as being friends, and then they develop into something more. Now, David is a person who narrates the story very well. He's very open with everything. However, when it comes to his relationship with Giovanni, he kind of hides, he's evasive. So we know that he has a lot of, and throughout the story also, we know David is a person who has a lot of internalized homophobia compared to Giovanni, who's just free and outgoing and everything. So in that sense, you could say that Giovanni is a proper foil to David, and vice versa. Then we also have this other character. We've got a host of other characters with different qualities, different characteristics, and how they act. It all ends up culminating at one point in the end of the book. But anyway, we have Hella, who is basically David's girlfriend, and David has asked her to marry him, by the way. And then she goes off to Spain to think about it. And when she's off to Spain, that is when David meets Giovanni, and this whole story happens. Then Hela comes back, and now Giovanni is there. So David has to think what he intends to do, because if he marries Hela, then of course he'll have to put a stop to what's happening with Giovanni. And at the same time, in France, it's not a crime, being with Giovanni. But in America, he knows he can't have a male partner, right? So there's a lot of issues or dilemmas that he's facing, David, and him working it out is what we see. Now, for David, he's just a tourist in Paris. He can do whatever he wants. He's having fun. It's not his real life. He's sort of in an escape, rather, from real life, which is back America. And so he can bother to do all of these, flings, whether it's with a man or a woman, whatever it is, But Giovanni is all in. He is in love, but David is not. I mean, David is in love, but he's also very, very practical, and he, like I mentioned, has a lot of internalized homophobia. So that's that. So the story is basically it's basically David trying to figure out what to do, what not to do, how to move forward, dealing with his own internalized homophobia and everything. Overall, a really, really good read. It's quite short, but I was not able to read it at one go because it's kind of heavy. I feel like, so I read it over 3-4 days. Overall, I really enjoyed it though, and I think I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Now moving on, I listened to the audiobook of Unraveling by Brandon Leake. I got the audiobook on libro.fm, and it's basically a collection of poems by the author. It's also narrated by the author. Now I think that the reason this book did not work for me was perhaps because I might prefer reading poetry as opposed to listening to poetry, But overall, it was a good read. It was really interesting. It deals with many issues that people like us in our 20s, even late teens, we relate to a lot. Feeling adrift, feeling lost, not belonging to where you are right now. You have imposter syndrome. You're not able to show your true self to people, always having a facade on everything. However, I have noticed that the poems have sort of an arc from feeling lost and everything to actually living life. They move through the stages. It also deals with fatherhood, relationship with God, the poet's identity as a black man in America, stability, so on. So overall it was an interesting read, but I have to say that listening to an audiobook was perhaps not for me, and I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. Now let's talk about the romances that I read. I will not be delving deep into those because I don't want to at this moment, and it's been such a long time that I don't really remember a lot. So yeah. Firstly, I read Overnight Wife by Penny Wilder. Don't read it, just 1 star. Then I read Black Ties and White Lies by Kat Singleton. I have heard about this so much, seen it everywhere, but the characters are so immature. I was this close to banging my head on the wall. I rated it 2 stars. Don't bother, I think. But that said, I do think that the synopsis for book 2 sounds interesting, so I might check it out. If I don't like it, I'll DNF it, but I might check it out. So then the 3-star romances that I read. Firstly, I read When She Loves by Gabriel Sands, which was a 3-star read. Then I read the Broken Vows by Katharina Mora, and also The Secret Fiancé by Katharina Mora. Both were the books in the Windsor series, and I think only 1 book is now left for that series to be completed. Anyway, I rated both of them 3 stars as well. And then I also read Captured by a Sinner, which is, I think, the last book in the Sinner series by Michelle. Again, I rated it 3 stars. So those were all the 17 books I read this month. I hope you had a fun time watching this video. I tried to keep the reviews as short as I could because otherwise, if it's too long, I'm gonna have trouble editing the video. But I hope you enjoyed this video. And yeah, this is my new shelf. By the way, if you've just noticed, you can definitely check out the video that I have uploaded prior to this, I think, of this whole bookshelf, how I made it. Kind of like a very rough vlog. I didn't really intend to make a video, but then I thought in the future I might want to look back. So for my personal sake, I made that video. But yeah, if you're interested, definitely check it out. I'll link it somewhere up, either this side or that side. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again in another video, and until then, take care, and I love you all. Bye.